The views and opinions expressed in the following paid pre-recorded program are those of the host, callers, and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the station, its management, or its owners.
Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC. Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC. Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Capital Advisory Group, Inc. is not affiliated with Kestra IS or Kestra AS. Neither Kestra IS nor Kestra AS provide legal or tax advice and are not certified public accounting firms.
You work hard for your money. For the next hour, you're going to learn how to keep what's yours. Capital Advisory Group presents Keep What's Yours. Here are Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Well, hello. Welcome to the show. I am Josh Gilbert, sitting here with Jeff Zufall. He is the Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. Hello, Jeff.
Hello. Happy Saturday.
We got big news on the Fed. Will there be a rate cut? What happens if there's a rate cut in other countries? Do other countries have a Fed that can cut rates? So we'll see about that. Inherited IRAs, non-spouse. You got a great aunt that left you an IRA? Do you have a parent?
Yeah.
That left you an IRA? We got some new rules about that. Tax returns, amended tax returns, extensions, the dates are coming up, and the IRS is targeting millionaires, and they've already collected $1 billion from 1,200 people. Wow, you think about that. That's almost $1 million a person. And the IRS is collecting money on our behalf, and we'll talk about all of that as well. But, Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm doing beautiful. How about you?
Very good, and I'm kind of happy because before we started this, you had said something about, it's mid-year.
Yes.
Go in, check your assets, make sure you're diversified, make sure that, your stocks, bonds, and cash look good or look the way you want it to. It's an election year.
Yes.
And if you're skittish about what might happen after November, maybe you want to load up in something else. And
exactly. And again, it's not that it's a panic that, the market's going to crash or anything crazy like that. What you want to do is just look at what degree of risk are you assuming. And everybody's been making good money in the markets, but we are in election year. And what takes place is that fear of the unknown kicks in, and it's here, late summer, it kicks in. People panic. They do weird stuff in their brokerage accounts. They do weird stuff in their 401ks. We've been how many elections in this country? We've never blown up and the world's gone crazy. We just have the fear of the unknown. Market gets really rocky, and then literally the day after the election, we go right back to the norm. And again, the economics and all that fun stuff get tied into this later, but currently everything's moving along. So what you want to do is go look at your brokerage statements. Look at your 401k statements. That's the one that got everybody in 2008. Market was racing away. Nobody worried about what degree of risk they were assuming. And then all of a sudden, boom, 2008 hit and the world came to a screeching halt and everybody lost money. So just analyze it. Look at it. If you're there because you have, say, tech stocks or individual holdings and you've made really good money on it, you might want to really think that through.
And let's talk about that for a second because I'm a young guy, 40. I'll be 43 in a week, but I'm young when it comes to looking at the stock market, to looking at my retirement. I just looked up my stuff after you said something, and I realized I didn't even start saving until 2015.
Exactly.
Which is one of the reasons why you joke, only half joking, you're also half serious, that I won't be able to retire until I'm 75.
Yep, 76.
76? Oh, no. Because I got started late, but I don't remember what happened in 2008, but I do remember what happened in 2020.
Yes.
When the world shut down, COVID hit, we just hit 30,000?
Yes.
For the first time, and it was great, and it was a record.
Was beautiful, and then literally the market dropped thousands of points in a couple of days.
And, we went down to 20 or maybe 22.
Exactly. And the funny part is everybody, all the economists were all predicting that it was just going to fall off the face of the earth because of COVID, and COVID actually became a great year. 2020 was positive, on average double digits, but you had to stay in the market to get that. So that's what I'm saying is that Just review your degree of risk that you're assuming. Look at your 401k. Look at your brokerage statements. There's a reason why you own those companies. There's a theory. If it's not holding up to that theory, sell it.
Why'd you get into that company in the first place?
Yeah.
Is that reason still valid?
If it's valid, keep it. If it isn't, or the company isn't, some companies are missing the marks on some of their earnings. Maybe they're doing stuff, getting off the beaten path in a sense from originally where you bought them. Sell it. Don't even think twice about it.
Let me ask you this. When it comes to doing our taxes, because I love Jeff Zufall, and this is one of the reasons why we tout Jeff as the way to go. You can call him right now, 636-394-5524. Get on his calendar, go in, visit with Jeff, see if you like what he has to say. He's a wealth advisor, but he's also your tax strategist.
Yes.
You're both.
Yeah.
And the beauty of having that is you can make a move in your 401k. You can make a move inside of your brokerage account.
Mm-hmm.
And I can ask you without having to set up a separate appointment with my tax guy.
Exactly.
I could say, what's my tax outcome going to be?
What's the outcome? What's it look like? What if you took, hey, I'm going to start taking $1,000 a month. How do I withhold tax? Where's it come from? Should you do a Roth conversion? There's a lot of different calculations that go on an annual basis. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that clients don't ever see.
There's a thing in real estate that if you sell a property and then immediately roll it into another property,
that's a 1031 exchange.
You can avoid
exactly. You kick the
capital
can,
gains.
Kick the can down the road.
You can avoid capital gains tax.
And where a lot of people fail on this is they enter into an agreement to sell their property, and then they go, "Oops, I didn't know that existed." It's too late. So prior to
you almost have to have the new property lined up.
Yeah, you have to have technically three that you pick, and it's random. You could change. You could pick your neighbors, and two houses down the street. You need to have a replacement property put on paper when you enter into this agreement. That way, then you negotiate the sale of your current property, and then the taxes are bypassed, and you're not getting out of them. You're just pushing them down the road. Mm-hmm. You're just pushing them in the new
when
property.
You sell the new place, you're paying the property tax.
Pay a double capital gain. But the concept
capital
is,
gains, yeah.
The way it sits today, the theory or the concept on it is right now everything is inherited. You want to call it as a step up in basis, which means if you leave it to your children and you pass away, they inherit those properties on a step up in basis, which means they don't pay any tax. So you buy rentals.
If you play the game long enough and you have rental properties or a beach house or a second house, a third house, a fourth house, you can play this game that you keep it until you die.
Exactly. And it could be a long, long time, too.
Sure. But a lot of people, they want to liquidate that stuff when in their retirement.
They get out and they're like, I'm sick of being a landlord. I'm just sick of dealing with it, so I'm going to sell it.
I told my wife, we've got a condo that we share with my parents down in Gulf Shores. I told my wife, this is my retirement plan.
Yeah.
But if we were to sell it before I pass away, I'm going to have to pay capital gains tax on it, one way or another.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see that they have that in real estate, but do they have that in a brokerage account? If I've got something that's making some money, can I sell it and put it into something else?
No.
And avoid capital gains tax?
No, you're not. You'll never get out. Well, if it's in a standard taxable brokerage account, capital gain, capital loss apply at all times. There's really no way to push.
There's no such thing. Well, I want to move it over here now.
Yeah.
If you sell it and
it's a gain,
and it's a gain, you got to pay taxes.
So that's that mid-year tax planning stuff. So let's say that you go in your brokerage account. You got winners and losers. Sell some of your winners, take some gain off the table, preserve profit, and then sell your losers. The losers offset the gains that the winners make. And it's never a perfect science by no means. But again, that's if those losers are not abiding by the philosophy on why you purchased it, dump it and run and take the loss. IRAs, it doesn't matter. You could trade all day long in Roths and in regular IRAs, 401ks, 403bs. You're never going to create taxation until you take it out at a later date. And it's whatever you actually take out is what you pay tax on.
But in a brokerage account, when you sell a stock, there is no such thing as transferring.
No, there's no transfer.
You sell the stock, you get the money, then you buy a new stock.
Exactly.
It's a trade. It's a taxable event.
Yeah. So what gets a lot of people is what's called a wash sale, which means if you're selling a losing stock, okay, so you bought XYZ company and it's lost $1,000, you sell it, you think you're going to realize this $1,000 loss, but yet you buy that same stock back less than 31 days later, you have an issue and you revert back to your original basis and you don't get the loss. So you have to be careful when you're doing tax lot trading from a loss standpoint, just to make sure that you go 31 days or buy a totally different security.
And if we call you up and we become a client, I am a client of Jeff Zufall, full disclosure. Jeff does my taxes every year. If we become a client and I want to try to do this, you'll walk us through the process.
Yeah. We set up a time. You send us, if we're running your brokerage, we're pretty much setting that in play and saying, hey, and sometimes we do this seriously behind the scenes. We don't explain it to you. We have, in some accounts, we have discretion, which means we can go in and sell losers, sell part winners, create this tax lot trade, and then reset the deck and go forward or go a totally different direction. And again, you take investment philosophy, you take tax concepts, and put them together on that as you go forward.
Yeah. So Jeff can help you out with that. And the beauty, again, of him being your wealth advisor and your tax advisor and your tax strategist is the fact that you could come up with a scheme. And I say scheme because this is what I do. I come up with this scheme and I say, Jeff, I want to do this. And I think, the economy is going in the wastebasket. I want to do this and do that and do this. And Jeff will sit me down and say, Josh, look, what you're trying to do is terrible.
Yes, don't do that.
You're going to create a huge tax burden for yourself and your wife. I know what you want to do. There's a better way of doing it.
There, yes.
And then you can make more money and avoid more taxes, and that's why Jeff is here.
Exactly.
So if you have an idea of what you want to do and you've been going it alone, I was talking to Connor. He works here at the station during the week, and he said his grandfather still is a very frugal man, still does his own taxes by hand.
There are very few of those.
And I'm like, how is it possible? Even if they are retired or something, there's probably still a lot of things going on behind the scenes.
There is.
Especially with RMDs and stuff. There's a lot to keep track of.
There's a bunch to keep track of, and you got to be careful on the schedules. If you're doing a tax return by hand, you have to transfer certain dollars over or percentages over from one schedule to the other schedule. And that's where we see a lot of math errors.
Yeah, just simple math errors.
Just simple math because it didn't transfer over, and you either paid too much or paid not enough. I'd say paying not enough is probably the bigger issue because then you got to write a check at a later date versus paying too much, then they refund it back to you.
Yeah, so. And when you don't pay enough, the juice is rolling.
Oh, yeah.
And what is it now? It's 8?
It's running 8% is
8%.
The actual underpayment penalty. So if you owe more than $1,000 to the state and or the IRS, underpayment penalties apply. There's all a bunch of different rules in there, but typically most people will end up getting hit with some small underpayment penalty for owing a couple $1,000.
Yeah.
So
this is the time. It's mid-year, and now is the time to reassess. Are you diversified as much as you want to be?
Exactly.
Are you still in it to win it with certain stocks in your brokerage account?
Still want to look at it as your risk tolerance. How much risk were you put out there for what your reward is? And then the flip side of that is, big picture, where do you think politics are going? Where do you think the economy's going? And that's all kind of a personal.
Where do you think gold's going?
Exactly.
Stuff like that. The metals market.
And it's not a fact of selling all of your stock and moving it into gold because the election's coming and the world's going to come to an end. I mean, that's
what those commercials tell me to do.
Oh yeah, that's what they say. The dollar's going to get devalued and no one can do anything. And you go,
Talk to someone who knows what they're doing, and that's Jeff, a wealth advisor, senior tax strategist. You can get advice from Jeff. You can also get your tax advice to say, well, what if I do this? What's my tax burden going to be? Jeff can tell you right then and there.
Exactly.
Maybe you can say, don't do it.
Yeah. Sometimes we say, no, bad idea.
Yeah.
Do it this way.
But what the IRS is going to hit you with is not worth the squeeze, and then Jeff will always come up with at least in my case, a much better idea than what I brought to him. And sometimes at this time of year, we look and see how much cash do we have. Maybe I got too much cash.
Exactly.
Well, I don't need all this cash.
So here's the good side.
Cash doesn't make money. Actually, it loses.
But technically, if you take inflation today versus cash, yes, that's the whole reason you invest is to beat inflation. And we've kind of lost sight of that big picture. That was the whole reason that you would invest in the past, even to today, was, inflation's 2% or 2.5. You need a 3 or 4% rate of return so that your dollar is worth $1 next year.
I mean, here's the deal. My $10,000 in the coffee can out back in 2019 can't buy as much from the grocery store as
nowhere near. And it's a scary number.
If I dug it up and took it in today.
Exactly. Because again, if you look at the inflation factor, that is year over year change. So what it's not doing, it's a speedometer just saying, hey, this is where we're at right now. It's not an odometer going back to say, hey, in 2019, you had $1 in your hand. Today, that dollar might be worth 80 cents. And that's basically what it boils out to be.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Because it's that cumulative inflation as we go forward. Now, can the Fed get this under control? That's a whole nother ballgame out there. The question is it really inflation? We injected $30+ trillion into the economy in 20 and 21. Both sides are guilty of it, but they kind of had to just because of what was taking place. So now we're seeing the byproduct of that, and that is crazy inflation because we injected cash into the open market. And then you go, okay, is corporate greed in there? I think that's a little bit of it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Little supply chain issue that hypothetically has been resolved.
It was an issue. Is it so much anymore?
No, I don't really think it is. Amazon shows up pretty quick every day.
Almost on the same day.
Yes. Maybe 2 times a day.
Yeah.
Which is scary.
Boy, your wife must be like my wife.
Yeah. There's stuff that gets ordered and it's there by 5 o'clock and she's like, hey, go out on the porch. There's something out there. I'm like, you just ordered it. And boom, it's there.
It's here.
So I don't think that's the issue, but that did cause this curve, if you want to call it.
We all were okay with that. It was like, wartime.
Yeah,
we all
kind of said, hey, we'll deal with it. Yeah.
We were okay paying a little more because we were all on lockdown in this together. But now
it's never came back where it needs to be.
Right. They haven't lowered the prices.
No. And it's, if you really look at it, you say, hey, it's predominantly grocery store. It's a little bit of everything. Auto insurance rates, homeowners insurance rates have quadrupled. It's crazy numbers that are out there, and you go, all right, how long can this go on? Because what we see is now we're seeing people were, a good year and a half out of COVID, 2 years out of COVID. And now we're seeing people where inflation is starting to get them. They've been able to flip the bill basically as we went through because they had a little bit of savings. They could put it on a credit card, et cetera. And now we're seeing where people are coming along saying, hey, I need an extra $500 or $600 a month minimum to survive. And they don't live an extravagant life by no means. Mm-hmm. But that's where we're seeing that's in the effects of inflation.
I tell you, after 2, 3, 4 years of this, I'm feeling it.
Yeah. And you say, okay, I've robbed my savings account. I started to put stuff on credit cards. It just every angle that you look at, every price has gone up. And the question is what slows that down, what prevents it, and that's way out of my pay grade.
Yep. So mid-year, take another look at what you're doing. Give Jeff a call. Go in and see him. He can take a look at it, and he can say, well, why are you doing this? What was the point of doing that in the first place? And I could tell you, Jeff, what if I sat down and said, well, my end goal is this? You could look at my stuff year to date and say,
work backwards to it.
Yeah. You're not heading there.
Yeah. You may be too aggressive. It sounds crazy to be too aggressive, but sometimes for the degree of risk that you assume, you will not get the reward on the flip side. So again, sometimes it may be better to go middle of the road, sometimes a little bit more conservative. And when we say that, that's not wholesale selling all of your assets and going a different direction. It may just be 1 or 2 funds or 1 or 2 stocks that you adjust to get you there.
Are you still heading towards your goal for this year, for 5 years, for 20 years down the line? Take a look at it now. You still got half a year almost to take advantage of any changes that you make. And what is the tax burden going to be on those moves? Jeff can answer all of those things because he is both your wealth advisor and your senior tax strategist. That is the beauty of Jeff Zufall at Capital Advisory Group. The website, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com, 636 394-5524 is the phone number, 636-394-5524. And it is mid-year or just a little over mid-year. There is still a chance to make some adjustments. Are you heading in the right direction? Now's a chance to take a look at it as we go into the second half of the year. Let's go into the second half of the show. It is Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. I'm Josh Gilbert. We'll take a break. But when we come back, the Fed made some moves or hinted at something, or maybe another country's Fed just did something. Let's talk about how it affects us here in the States. It's Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall on the Big 550 KTRS.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
We are here. We are continuing, and the conversation is turning to the Fed. And, everybody always wants to know, what do you always say about the Fed? We all want to know what they say, but we also want to know what they do. What's the most important thing here?
It's more so what they say. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the key. There's right now people are dissecting their what do you want to call it? I'll call it the dissertation that they put out Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning. To say, oh, this is what they say they're going to do. And again, if you go back, first time in a long time, and that was fourth quarter of 23, Fed came out and said, hey, we're going to lower interest rates. And everybody sat back and went, what? And to their defense, what they were saying is, hey, if we have the ability to lower interest rates in 24, we do not want to make it a political statement.
Oh, we don't want to do it in a political year.
Yeah. So, but if we have the ability, we're going to do it. So we're sitting first week of August. They have not been able to do it just yet. But what they kind of led to was, hey, mate, we might do it in September. So it's a very good possibility that September they drop a quarter point. But the Chicago Board of Exchange puts out their, I call it Vegas odds. They got a little bit more technical analysis behind that. Mm-hmm. And they're saying that the Fed meets September and the Fed meets the week after the election, November, second week of November. And they're leaning, there's like an 82 or 86% chance that the Fed lowers it the week after the election. That way, they're nonpartisan. They're not going to push it one way or the other.
We're going to lower it in calendar year 2024, but not in a way that we could either hurt either candidate.
The politics of it. But now some of them are saying maybe September, but that is literally right before an election. I find that a little tricky. You can look at it from both sides, but it's still a little tricky.
It's funny. I have heard you say for the last 3 years, the Fed doesn't do anything in an election year because they don't want to have even the appearance of having any bias.
Of playing a bias, yes. So again,
but I've heard everybody, they're going to lower rates. Oh, they're going to lower rates now. And I'm like, well, we have people that say, oh, we're sure they're going to lower rates now. And I'm thinking, Jeff said they never do that.
They really don't.
Where is it played out here? We're in August now. They've done it the way that Jeff said they were going to do it.
Just going neutral. They go neutral, and literally, so here's the setup. Let's say that they do it the week after the election, no matter who wins. Whoever wins the election has a tailwind that goes right into, they're not even in the White House yet, technically, elected in, and they will have this tailwind that helps push them right into their presidency, because once they decrease interest rates, the market should move, or that's what the general consensus is, the market should move. And everybody is kind of sitting there, may move a day and then just go flat, but everybody's been waiting for this rate decrease that they keep talking about. So if it happens in November, that's great. They're nonpartisan, but it will push the winning party right into the White House, make them look like rocket scientists, and they really didn't do anything.
Yeah.
It's pure economics.
I want to talk about the rate cut and what the percentage would be, but when they released this information, I wasn't looking this past week. Did the markets jump?
No. It's status quo. Nothing fancy. Everybody kind of expected in July they weren't going to do anything. Mm-hmm. Little too soon, just because, and again, you still have inflation out there in the open market. Job market's okay. It's actually kind of good, to be honest with you. And we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown, so that's the question. A lot of economists say, again, to discredit the Fed, that they're a little behind. So whatever move they do, they're going to be late to the game. But again, you hope that they're the smartest people in the room. They have access to the most data that nobody else has, and can interpret that data in the right way. Because the Fed's not just looking at, hey, we're worried about this week and next week and by December. They're looking 3, 5, 10 years into the future, trying to manipulate the economy to make it go right. So,
current rate. What does a rate cut look like? I mean, did we go from 8% to back down to 3%?
Well, remember, when you talk the Fed, this is banks loan money to each other. It's Fed funds rate. The direct correlation then is to prime rate and so on and so forth.
My mortgage rate.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Fed funds rate is literally one bank says, hey, I need $1 million. It gets loaned to the other one, and they pay an overnight rate. But typically those are quarter point decreases and increases, very subtle. I mean, there's been in the past, there have been half point hikes. There have been half point rate drops. But typically it's a quarter point. And then the repercussions come back out. That's prime. Prime goes down by that quarter. Your mortgage rate it's not a direct correlation because it's really the bond market that is running what you pay for a mortgage. And that's the problem is the share prices on bonds have dropped like a rock. The yields have skyrocketed. And then as these Fed fund rates come down, they reverse. So that's the question of the day is when does the Fed actually do something? We don't know.
In a quarter of a point, that's a 0.25 off of the current rate right now. How much can that really move? Like, what is that real world dollar amount, a quarter of a point? Say I've got a $2,000 mortgage. How much would that knock off the mortgage?
From the interest that you're paying if you have a fixed rate, which most people locked in at 2.5 or 3% max. But let's say you just bought a house here recently and you're like, yeah, we want rates to go down so we can refinance. Quarter point might be, if you're paying $2,000 in interest, maybe $50, $75 a month. So, but it'd have to be a variable rate in order for your interest to come down
automatically.
Most people don't buy variables anymore from a loan standpoint, like a 5-year or a 6-year, whatever they are, variables. Just because you could lock them in the past and you get a 2.5%, 3%, 30-year fixed.
Why would I play with it?
Yeah, why play with it? Especially in a rising interest rate environment. So, again, most people bought a home in the last 2 years. They locked it in. But the question is, we look at it from a standpoint mathematically, maybe a half to a full percentage point decrease from where you locked in at to current rates before it mathematically makes sense.
Oh, I see.
Again, to refinance.
Yeah, if this happens, we're not going to see a rush of people refinancing.
I don't think at a quarter, but let's say that they do it. Say they do it in November, and then they come along sometime in 25 and do another quarter. Then you might see the mortgage application refinance start to pick up.
And I bring up mortgages because most of us, that's
your biggest bill.
That's where we look at.
Yeah.
But what does this mean as far as the markets go, as far as business goes? Dropping a quarter of a percent, is this big?
It's the start. I won't say it's big, but it's definitely the start. We see a lot of people with SBA notes that are in the good 7-digit range.
Small business loans
that they got that are variable rates, and when they got them, they were at 2%. And then over time, it's worked its way up. And there are SBA notes I've looked at in the last month. They're 11.1%, and it's killing them. They can't sustain this. They've been able to pay it for a while, but eventually it's going to come to an end. And the problem is it's SBA notes, so it's backed by the federal government, but the bank doesn't want to give them any reprieve on their notes because it makes them look bad, and I get it. And sometimes there's personal guarantees that are put on top of these things, like you pledged your house or something crazy for it, and it gets bad. It gets very ugly quick.
Yeah.
So if rates come down, it not only helps the average consumer, but it will actually help small businesses be able to pay the bills, basically.
Sure. So what happened? Well, short answer, nothing.
Nothing.
But why are we talking about it then? Well, because they came out and they said something.
Yeah, they said September. They'd really look at that possibility of September. Like I said, Chicago Board of Exchange says, no, it's not September. It's really
80%
November.
probably going to be in November.
As long as they can do it, as long as the economy stays somewhat stable, inflation comes down or stays. But see, that goes against the mantra of what the Fed has said all along. Fed has said all along, higher for longer, which means increase rates. Not to say it's different this time, by no means, but it is. Our economy is way different than it was in the late 70s, early 80s. So the question is you just can't raise interest rates and slow everything down. There's way more factors out there. So they kind of realize that. So they say, hey, higher for longer. Now, does that mean that we can get down to a 5% interest rate? And that's what they mean by higher, and that 5% rate stays out for the next 5 years? Who knows? That's the problem is they don't play their hand as to, hey, this is where we're heading.
Yeah.
Other than they want inflation to be at 2 to 2.5%.
That's their goal, ultimately.
That's their goal.
What happens when, we mentioned this earlier, another country's Fed makes a rate cut or a rate hike? Does that affect us at all?
Really doesn't in the big scope of stuff, but they do talk to one another. And
who just lowered their?
Does Japan. Second time that they've lowered their rates since 2007.
Oh.
So that's a long time.
Okay, so they weren't necessarily dealing with the same things we were dealing with.
Not
here.
at all.
Okay.
Not at all. And again, if you go back to the 80s, Japan's economy was on fire. People were like, well, they're going to buy everything up in the world and Japan's going to own everything. And then they just kind of fizzled out. Nobody ever heard a word from them again. They sold their assets off in the States and globally, and they kind of just went back to Japan. And I say that seriously. And then you really don't hear anything from it anymore. And the reason being is their economy overheated. Their Fed wasn't as, as adaptive as what our Fed is. They got a couple of missteps. Their economy just kind of flatlined. So again, what the Fed does is, I say it legally, manipulate our economy as we go forward.
Somebody's got to take care of the baby.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
Exactly.
And if you're just running hot and you don't throw any guardrails in there,
you're going to implode.
Any speed bumps,
yep.
You'll happen. Because I remember growing up, I was a child of the 80s and the 90s, and everyone thought big bad Japan
was going to buy everything and own every company, and then they just kind of poof.
Yeah, because their inflation got too high.
Their inflation got too high. Their economy ran too hot. They didn't flip the switches at the right time, and it just fizzled out.
So raising the rates, it might not be beneficial to us if we want to buy a new house, but it is beneficial.
Credit cards.
Yeah, to our economy to slow this mother down.
Yeah.
Because it's been running really hot.
Well, and so if they decrease rates, the theory is they decrease rates, that sparks your economy, gets the wheels in motion again. So we say, hey, the market's been running great for a while. Unemployment's good. So far, from a corporate standpoint, earnings season or second week of earnings season again. People are missing, but they're still holding their own. And again, they lower rates. That should spark growth right out of the box.
Let me ask you this. Starbucks just in the news again this week because they said that their sales are down 3%.
Mm-hmm.
Their costs of their goods to us, for consumer, not their costs, but what they're charging us has just gotten too high.
Yeah,
and
that's all it is.
McDonald's did it a couple months ago. They said, okay, look, we're really overcharging people.
Yes.
Our menu prices have gotten so high that people have stopped coming. Starbucks has hit that point as well. It's tough.
And the funny part is, remember, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago in the Consumer Price Index, which is our monthly gauge of inflation. What did they take out of the calculation in April?
They took coffee out of there.
Raw coffee bean, because it had increased 78% year over year, or I think 18 months.
That's insane.
So
78% price increase.
Yeah. And the question is why? And some of the stuff I read, because I drink a lot of coffee, they said it is global warming is affecting where the beans are being grown, the crops aren't as big as what they were, and so on and so forth. And you go, okay.
Now, is that the cost to Starbucks to buy the beans?
It eventually, yes, because the overall cost was up 78%. They didn't break it down, but It just said overall cost. So
rather than McDonald's and Starbucks lower their prices, they're coming with these value meals. Or, if you come in and buy a overinflated coffee and a scone, we'll knock off $1 or whatever. So they're not lowering their prices. They're just coming up with these value meals.
Exactly. And we're also getting kind of, I don't want to say the end of the game, but we're getting to the point where the inflation is really people are starting to feel it way more than what they did a year ago or a year and a half ago.
The pinch is on.
Exactly.
So here's my question. If the Fed drops the rate by 1/4 point, will that then, and we've seen these companies do it, embolden the corporations to raise their prices again?
Very well could. Because what it'll do is spark the economy. People start spending again. And when I say spending, it's not day-to-day spending. It's big-ticket items, stuff that you need to borrow money for. And so you'll see an uptick in that because the rates are cheaper.
Over the last 5 years, grocery store prices, you just pick a bottle of soda or a jar of salsa, it's jumped up almost 50% in cost. Yeah. Some have doubled.
Some have doubled, seriously.
And it's insane, and you think there's no way they can increase the prices even more. What's done is done. They'll never lower prices.
I don't think they'll go backwards. It would take a lot for a company to go, hey, we're going to give you a 50% discount on what we were charging you because they lose money.
I would hope that they have gouged us enough that when they start dropping the rates, they won't gouge us even more.
You would think, but we'll see. That's still an unknown because, again, that's that unknown step. They lower rates. Hypothetically, what does it affect within the market? And the reason it helps us is indirectly, hypothetically, rates will come down by a max of 1/4. And again, if they do it multiple times, it just gets the wheels in motion again for the economy to go forward.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, we will see. Maybe they'll cut it in September, but most likely, at least according to the Chicago markets, who are keeping the odds 80% that if they drop a rate cut on us, it'll happen in November after the election.
Literally the week after.
They do not want to appear to be trying to manipulate one way or another this upcoming presidential election. So Jeff Zufall, he offers these kinds of words of wisdom, and he can read the tea leaves for you, a senior tax strategist and wealth advisor. If you want to make a move when it comes to your retirement, he can also tell you at the very same time what it's going to do regarding your taxes. 636-394-5524 is the phone number. CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com is the website. We'll go to commercial break, and when we come back, another important thing, inherited IRAs for a non-spouse. You got to liquidate it in 10 years. What are the actual rules? We'll get into that right after this.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
All right, with the time we have left, we promised it. We're going to talk about inherited IRA just really quickly, though. If you filed an extension for a corporation or an S-Corp, September 15th.
That's right, September 15th. Any pass-through entities, partnerships, LLCs, all that good stuff. And then October 15th is the big one. That's the personal. So, again, if you filed an extension, it's creeping up on you slowly.
Yeah.
Make sure at least you start getting your stuff together so that the last minute you're like, oh, no, it's due tomorrow.
And if you have an amended tax return, you can file it electronically with the federal government.
Federal government now allows, we can now do electronic filing for amended returns. The problem is the states, Missouri and Illinois, still do not allow us to do it electronically.
Woof.
Hopefully next year they kind of have leaned that they're going to more than likely get their systems ready to go. So you can do an amended return. Whereas in the past, now you have to print the state of Missouri or Illinois. Client has to sign it. We have to mail it in. Kind of a long-winded process. States are better than the IRS, or faster from a processing standpoint. But still, if we could e-file it, it's like boom, boom, and you're done.
Yeah.
So
when it comes to inherited IRAs for a non-spouse, if you're a spouse, you inherit an IRA, you don't pay taxes.
Yeah. It basically just flip the account over, put your name on it. Looks like it was yours to start with. Nobody knows the difference.
Right. But you do pay taxes, but you don't have to liquidate it in 10 years.
No. Literally, you can trade back and forth. So if your spouse passes away on an IRA, you just take it over.
Okay.
Don't pay any tax. You then would be responsible for the tax at a later date going forward.
Sure.
So now this is non-spouse. So Aunt Betty leaves you $1 million, and you go, wow, I haven't seen her in 10 years. You inherit this IRA, and the IRS, and this is a 2-year-old rule. So the first year, everybody looked around and they went, do you have to do an RMD on it, which is a required minimum distribution?
Every year.
Every year. And everybody went, I'm not quite sure.
So liquidate it within 10 years, but every year do we have to pay something?
So here's what the IRS has now said. They have actually made their official ruling, and this really came out in 20. So the years... It
officially came out in 20, but they really didn't
give any guidance whatsoever on this. So we stepped back and said, all right, to be conservative, again, you inherit this IRA, you got a 10-year window to take it out. So we were like...
If I inherit cash, I don't pay taxes on it unless it's over a certain...
No. Cash, if it's from a bank account, CD, anything that's just regular taxable, technically no. You inherit it for fair market value, step up, all that fun stuff.
But this is an account just like your account. I'll pay the taxes later.
Yep, IRAs.
Dad had one of these.
Yep.
Died before he could liquidate it himself. Leaves it to me. I still owe the taxes that he was supposed to owe.
Well, you owe the taxes at your tax rate.
Right.
So, but you got a 10-year window in which to liquidate it. Mm-hmm. So at least they've given us 10 years now versus just dumped in your lap and you got to pay the bill. So the question is, you inherit this IRA. We took the stance of, all right, if you inherit an IRA, and say $1 million, it's happened many, many, many times, 401ks that come across, so on and so forth. So what we would do is say, all right, go in, you take 1/10 of the account balance plus earnings each year, and you start to take that money out. So hypothetically, we indirectly would satisfy the required minimum distribution rule, which the IRS has now clarified and said technically if they were basically prior to taking their RMD, you don't have to. But if they were taking their RMD, you have to follow it through. And they're given a reprieve. So if you didn't take an RMD for 20, 21, 22, 23, and you didn't take the RMD, it's okay. Just fire it back up and make up the difference in 2024 going forward. So then this is for inherited IRAs only. Mm-hmm. So it's a beneficial IRA that's in your name. So typically most people will take that. If it's a small amount, they just cash it out, pay the tax 1 year, you're done. But if you drag it out more than a year, typically you go, maybe you do it 5 years. So by taking that money out, you've satisfied the RMD as you go forward. But this is just now it's clarified from the standpoint that there's a situation where you don't have to, and there's a situation where you have to. Yeah. Just depending upon what the age of the original owner.
So
was.
if Dad was 72 and the RMD kicked in, or 73 or 75, wherever it is now, and the RMD kicked in, and then he kicks the bucket, when it gets left to me, am I obligated?
You're obligated to continue that
Continue the RMD.
Or 10 years. So it's if you don't take any money out the first year you inherit it, you're forced to take an RMD, and then every year from there on out.
If he was 69 and he passed away and left it to me, the RMD didn't kick in yet.
Exactly.
So I don't have to.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when I sit down with you and say, Jeff, I got $1 million from my dad.
You need to start taking distributions.
Right. You have to start taking distributions.
You don't have to. You could let it sit there and grow.
But you want to.
Yeah, it would be a crazy amount that you would wait until the 10th year and then go, hey, I'm going to take out, $2 million. That's crazy.
And from a tax strategy standpoint, how much each year, that's up to Jeff.
Exactly. We back into that number.
You'll do the math.
Yeah, depending upon the account balance, because you still want that money to grow while you're sitting there waiting. Mm-hmm. So you'd create a brokerage account or whatever, and you would still want that money to grow, and then you would just divide it by, depends on your tax bracket today, maybe 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, but we typically use 10 years over $1 million.
Yeah.
It's $100 grand a month.
I mean, at some point, you're probably going to have to jump into a new tax bracket. And, that's just what happens when someone gives you $2 million.
It's a good thing.
You're coming out ahead either way.
Yes.
But how much you pay in taxes, sometimes that's up to you and your tax advisor.
Well, exactly.
And how you guys decide to do this.
Or you could, depending upon where your income's at, you could skip years. You can do all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. Sometimes getting $2 million, there is no such thing as free money.
No.
Okay. So, but there is such thing as overpaying your taxes because you don't do this strategically enough.
Exactly.
So that's the game when it comes to taxes. That's the game that we use Jeff Zufall for. He is our ace in the hole. He is our performance-enhancing drug, if you will. But the Olympics are going on right now.
Never been called that before.
Yeah, we're tax doping, and we're using Jeff Zufall to cheat, but not the system. We're using him to just tell us what the tax code is.
Exactly.
And how to navigate it to benefit us at the end of the day. Otherwise, we'll just pay more to the IRS, and who knows what they use it for. So I'd rather keep it in my pocket rather than going out to the IRS, and there's legal ways to do that. So that's what Jeff Zufall is here for. 636-394-5524, senior tax strategist and wealth advisor with Capital Advisory Group. Capital Advisory GRP. We're tax doping today, and we're just making sure that we've got the upper hand when it comes to the IRS. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week.
You bet.
You've been listening to Keep What's Yours with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Manager at Capital Advisory Group. To learn more, call 636-394-5524 or visit CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com.